If you read a book on a cosmetic industry, you're obsolete the moment you write it because things are evolving so fast that you need to be relevant, right? And it used to be that books that came out sort of positioned you to create a product that had a hero life cycle of 10 years. Today, if you have 3 years, you're lucky.
The Noti presents Growth Diaries, the fascinating stories behind the best brands in beauty, wellness, and fitness. Hosted by Sudhir Koneru.
Have you ever felt like the corporate 9 to 5 just isn't for you? That urge to walk away can be exciting, but also terrifying. Dr. Aneesh Sheth knows that feeling firsthand. When he left his consulting firm in New York and moved back to Mumbai in 2016, he had no plan. But just a year later, he founded Dr. Sheth's Skincare, scaling it to nearly 70 crores. And his boldest move came next, stepping into the legacy of his mother's iconic Dr. Sheth's clinics and taking it to the next level. Today, he's honoring a 3-generational legacy while boldly creating his own. It's an honor to have you here, Dr. Aneesh. Welcome to Growth Diaries, Dr. Aneesh. Thanks for making the time to join us here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, Dr. Aneesh, given that this is a 3-generation business, it only is appropriate that I ask you to start with giving some context around your grandfather and how he was one of the early pioneers in dermatology, which led to this business.
Yeah, absolutely. So my grandfather, Dr. Sharad Desai, he, was one of, I believe, one of India's first dermatologists. He started the dermatology department at KEM Hospital, which is, one of the biggest teaching hospitals in India. And he was the first one to organize an international dermatology conference in India. So he sort of put it on the map. Obviously, at that point, cosmetic dermatology was not a thing. So he did a lot of his work on fungal infections, which tend to be more popular, or I wouldn't say popular is the wrong word, but tend to be more common in areas like India where there's high humidity and things like that, where there wasn't as much work being done in other parts of the world. Cool.
So he was more in the academic space and the early person to even, I've heard of some of the founders of skin businesses who graduated from the same KEM dermatology department that he started. So
he did, yeah. So he was academic, but also clinical. So he had a very big practice. And I remember my grandmother telling me, my paternal grandmother telling me that, Raj Kapoor was your grandfather's client and he came to the wedding and I think most of the wedding photos have been destroyed because of time and things like that. But that photo has been where Raj Kapoor is there with my parents and their parents at the wedding reception is it's sort of cherished.
Cool. Nice. And then after that, of course, your mom went on to actually start Dr. Sheth clinics. And so can you share more color into how she got into the space? And it wasn't like in those days, cosmetology was acceptable as a business. Neither would she have thought it would be a big enough or interesting business in India.
No, absolutely. You're right. So when she worked with my grandfather, I think it's a little similar to the generational gap that everyone sees nowadays. I think my grandfather wasn't entirely thrilled that she was picking this stream because he was a hardcore clinician. But she was fascinated by the science that was emerging because it was a new field, right? And I think her point of view was less commercial and more academic, more research driven. So really understanding about different technologies. And because my grandfather knew Dr. Albert Kligman, who is obviously the founder of retinol, she got to work with him very closely on the effects of retinol on Indian skin and, so things like that. But when she would go, and I remember this story being told multiple times, right? That when she would go and speak or go to, medical conferences where she would have to speak to general physicians or things like that, they'd just be like, so why did you waste a seat if you wanted to become a beautician? even today, people don't really know what cosmetic dermatology is. They just think it's like what you do in a parlor, you do these facials, but here a dermatologist is doing it, you know?
Cool.
So, and of course, it came full circle because 20 years later, a lot of those people, you know, who made fun of her for being like a cosmetologist and wasting a seat in dermatology actually wanted her advice and how to use Botox and what Botox is and what laser hair reduction is, because their clients were asking them, you know, like, should I do this? Is it safe for me? And she was the authority in the space, right? Because she invented it.
So she started this in 94, I think, right? I mean,
So the clinic was started in 93, 94.
okay.
Which was India's first aesthetic clinic.
Yeah.
But she started doing aesthetic dermatology from 1975.
Oh,
You know, in her room, which she shared with my father. Like there were, it was a clinic where one room was hers and one room was my dad's, and he was a psychiatrist. So they both kind of benefited of that. Nobody wanted the other to know that they were going to each other. So they're like, oh no, I'm here because I have a rash. Oh no, I'm here because like I can't sleep. You know. So
Great.
the practice goes back to like 1975. And then I don't think they did any consumer research or anything, but she was so passionate about it and the science was evolving so rapidly. And she's like, it's crazy that there isn't something in India for Indian skin where these solutions can be applied, like a more elevated experience, right? People were still going to their neighborhood salons and expecting like anti-aging or expecting, you know, different kinds of treatments, but there wasn't anything medical.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think the Indian skin angle is very true because even in the US, when my wife goes to some place, there are people who will actually tell her, look, we don't know to treat this. Sorry, you should go home. And first time she was offended saying, okay, they're being racist or something. But then she came back and read up and realized that's really true. And that you need to have special attention to Indian skin. So
No, absolutely. I think that, you know, when she would go abroad and that time, you know, the only research you could rely on was that what was done in English speaking countries, right? Which was predominantly US and UK. And when she would go to conferences and see these machines, you know, she was the first to bring laser hair reduction to India. And I remember her bringing it with this guy who used to he used to usually distribute, I think, like engines or something else completely. And she like persuaded him to be like, okay, I want this machine. Can you get it? And when she would go and ask doctors, there was no support. Right now, if you buy a machine, there's an entire team to support you through, you know, like what settings to use and this or that. But when she went abroad to conferences and people, like it was a standard of care over there, right? Like this brand of laser machine. She would ask them, like, do you experience pigmentation, you know, in your burns or things like that? And obviously, everyone there was white and male, you know, so they'd just be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, yeah, no, I just next, you know.
cool. So she clearly had the passion and she did a lot of hands-on work. And that's what, it's not market research or et cetera that drove her to get into this. But then to really be successful, she ended up being the most reputed, person in Mumbai, just the equivalent of New York, and had some of the celebrities and all the folks as her thing. How did she actually crack into the market? I mean, at the end of the day, you still have to build a business. You have to go find your clients and drive your business. So
Yeah, I think.
do you remember or recollect how she went about doing that?
Oh, absolutely. I was part of that. I mean, child labor, 100%. So yeah, I mean, I tell people, I joke about this with everyone all the time that, you know, like other parents would give their kids like Famous Five or Secret Seven, or, you know, I was given like the principles of branding and the power of influence and like, you know, copywriting 101 and, you know, so, and I think her strategy was very grassroots, to go into Rotary clubs, to go into women's societies, to go and talk to them about what it is that she does, because people didn't have an idea. There was no internet. There was nowhere that people could ask questions, right? People were just like, I go to a beauty parlor for my facial, you know, and understanding, even at that time, if Botox, you know, was emerging, to understand what a peel was, to understand the difference between a beauty parlor and, you know, and sort of take into consideration and build that. We still have that presentation, by the way. The values that existed at that time, right? So it was a very grassroots driven approach. They didn't have the capital, you know. It's like I said, my grandfather didn't really approve of this discipline, so he wasn't funding anything. So it's networking, trying to figure, oh, you know, like you're part of the Rotary. Do you mind if I come and give a talk about, you know, so and so? And, you know, I guess it's full circle because community marketing is coming back. But that's how she sort of made a difference. And then obviously, because of the passion that she had, the results were visible, and one thing led to another, and then bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger clients started coming to her. And I remember one day she came and she's like, the celebrity came to me today. Like she was so like excited about it. And I mean, a lot of that obviously was in my early childhood, because by the time I reached my teens, you go in a waiting room and there's 3 celebrities there. They're not like big today, they'll be tomorrow. So
Cool. If you're enjoying the show, we would really appreciate it if you left us a review on Apple Podcasts. It only takes a minute and it helps others find the podcast. You can also follow along on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. So yeah, that's interesting. So it's, as you said, I think, we do find that successful entrepreneurs, especially who don't have the capital, using the local communities, like you said, Rotary clubs, women's societies and all that is a more cash efficient way of finding your early customers versus,
it's education at the end of the day.
Yeah, and especially in med spa, even to this day, I would say there's a lot of education involved, and still a smaller segment of the consumer knows what it means, etc. So our strategy worked well, and of course, as you said, results and word of mouth is what kicks off the whole.
Yeah, retention is always, referrals in this business hold a much, much bigger weight than any sort of campaigns that you're going to put out.
Yeah. So and I think she was also one of the first folks to be on the board of one of the International Dermatology Association. And so she was very well educated and traveled. How did that come about, I wonder?
Yeah, I think it also happened at a time when, there was a lot of conversation happening about like different, and I think at some level, this is all orchestrated by like the bigger companies, where they decide, okay, I want to look at India as a target or a market or things like that. And then they look at authority figures who've done research in that space. And there weren't that many, because even dermatologists who wanted to get into the space, or anyone who wanted to get into the space, even to this day, education is not structured in a way that you can rely on historical data, right? It's like I start a practice and it's my experience. I get my training from the pharma companies and, then I just build on that. But her methods were always very structured, so she would ask things to patients, which at the time they would just be like, why do you want to know like what I ate, Yeah. And she'd be like, because your skin is a reflection of what is going on inside, But yeah, so I think at that point, she started talking to experts, and, academic minds tend to congregate. Like there is challenge and discourse, and so, like I said, the moment, to have that kind of commercial appeal, but also academic appeal is something that she really worked hard towards. Like she used to do a lot of trials with Lever or L'Oreal, and I think they would take her to these places where she would then sit on a table, with these established figures, and have conversations with them as peers rather than, being the second-class brown doctor who's here for...
Yeah, cool. Great. So, okay. So you obviously worked with your mom in the early days. I mean, before you were, going to college and before teens, as you said, and helped her out. And in the process, learned about the business and marketing, looks like. But then you moved on. You went on for your education and all that. So maybe you should give us color into what did you do when you left home? And, you were not part of the business for a long time.
Yeah. When people ask me what my training is, I said I've pretty much done every job other than be a Bollywood star at this point. So people are watching. I mean, I'm open for an agent or a shoot or whatever. But yeah, so I went, I did my undergrad in pharmacy, in formulation science. Did my master's in medical journalism. I used to write for the press when I was in my undergrad because I didn't want a science nerdy brain, I wanted exposure. And it wasn't like I was writing medical articles. I was writing for like women's fashion magazine. Like they were like, what are the coolest restrooms in the bars in Bombay? Do you do that? And as a student, I was like, are you kidding me? I get to go to bars for free and you pay for my drinks? Like, this is like, what, like, I don't understand what the problem is. Like the first time I wrote a story, I was like, I can't take this money. This is like fun for me. And like the editor was just like, dude, like, what is wrong with you? Like the world works like this. This is you need to take the money. So then I did a degree in medical journalism because it was sort of building both my passions together, and worked in pharmaceutical marketing for a little bit. Realized at the same time I was interning in a lab as well, and realized that, I sort of anything in the world of pharma, a PhD is considered like your entry level degree if you want, some level of authority in the space. So I applied to Cornell, got into Cornell Sloan Kettering. They have a lab in the city. So I was there, did my PhD, had an amazing, amazing boss who really encouraged me to think in a very entrepreneurial way because my project was a little detached from what the lab was doing. So that sort of was the seed of entrepreneurship where, look, you have to figure it out. You have to go find people who are experts in that space. You have to make sure that they are able to critique what you're doing, not just at a superficial level, but at a level that everyone in the world can respect it. So building that up, sort of was a like building block for me. And at the end of my PhD, realized that I don't really want to do science. I like data, I like numbers, I like strategy, but I don't really like bench work. So started my own consulting company with a bunch of friends, got overconfident, went to these networking events. I'm part of like the solution lab and we provide solutions to like big pharma companies and managed to recruit a few. Did some good work there for a couple of years, 1 or 2 years, and realized at that point that my options were either to work as an entry-level job in corporate or to come back to India and do something there. So not everyone inherits a legacy. And I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm going to kick myself later, And so came back to India. It was quite the adjustment. My mom was like all ready for me to scale the clinics and, realized that you should never work with your mother. I learned a lot from her. So I said, okay, how can I work with her without working with her? And that's when I started formulating products. We had an extra room and she used to make some products that we used to use in the clinic. So we had basic like lab equipment. So started formulating by a recruiter chemist. And worked really well because we had a full sort of facility, right? Like we had a team of 8 dermatologists, plus my mother, plus consumers. And I never actually thought that the brand would grow outside the clinic, right? Like for me, this was what they call like a vertical integration, Like when I would tell people what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, you're vertical integration kar raha hai. So I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, so I was looking at products what people use in the clinic and, as consumables, as well as like retail, home care. And suddenly before I know it, I was like being talked about in magazines and, I had investors calling me and I was like, okay, let's try and put this online. Put it on Nykaa, started selling out. I didn't know anything about like supply chain, right?
Yeah,
so I'm like, shit, how did I sell out in 3 weeks? Like this was supposed to last me like 6 months. Like,
So,
yeah.
so I guess that's good that in the early days in New York, you learned about this foundational stuff around having other people critique what you're doing, look at it and being open to it. Because I think a lot of founders are not open to making sure what they're doing is right or not. So I think that probably helped you even when you were doing your products work with your mom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it started from my parents, right? Because when we were doing the branding, and she went through multiple brands before we landed on Dr. Sheth's. At every brand, she would ask like 5 people, 10 people. Like consumer research for them was normal. Like it wasn't labeled as such, but they would show it to like 10 people and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or like, what do you think about this? And, obviously they had their biases, but it was intrinsic. Like you can't make a decision without testing it with the consumer. So cool. Came from there, encouraged by my boss to be like, if you're building something, you need to be the expert in that to the point where you can go to whoever is the already established expert and be like, look, this is the flaw in your thinking. And this is where I think, I'm right. And, if there's any debate, we do an experiment. And it's okay. Like if I win, I win. If you win, you win, right? Like there's no right answer. It's about figuring out what is best for, in that case, the project, in this case, the business. So similarly with products, I would go to investors and talk to them. I would go to influencers, consumers, journalists,
Cool. So that's a very good example of like, as you said, okay, you couldn't work with your mom in the clinic itself, but then it's a family legacy and building a whole brand of retail products, which ended up being, and I believe still is, one of the leading brands in India and targeted towards Indian skin and etc. So that's a good strategy for anybody else who's like, okay, what can I do along my mom, but alongside my mom versus the other way. Great. And so before that, she was not into any products itself, right? Actual retailing, etc. But she made some.
Yeah, so actually she did try to create products. So that's the thing also, because my parents were very entrepreneurial, I think I sort of benefited from that, like different experiments. Like she started a grooming school, like teaching people how to like for beauticians and hairstylists. Then she started then of course that she worked with Lever to kind of make it more structured. But she started a line of products, which they didn't know anything about distribution. They didn't know anything about sales. It was retail in the clinic. And because they knew someone in the President Hotel at the parlor there, so they had like dead stock, which they had to literally throw away because at that time, like small MOQs were not a thing. And so when I started the product brand, they were like, no, we made this mistake. You can't do it.
Okay.
So
Great.
they did try it, but, it wasn't.
Okay. So obviously it became a successful brand because just before this interview, my wife is in the US. I was telling her, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Aneesh. And she was like, oh yeah, she's actually used your products, some sunscreen. She said it's a good product and all that.
Yeah.
So it became a mainstream. So I'm curious now, it's one thing to say, okay, fine, I feel you're trivializing it and saying, you built it and it's all done. But how did you go about marketing it and driving it, driving awareness? What did you have to do to make sure it actually took off?
I think like my degree in journalism helped a lot because you understand the value of content. My education in brand helped a lot. Like I didn't know anything about performance marketing. I didn't know anything about finance, logistics, things like that. But given that I knew what my assets were and I knew how to promote them and the conversations, that need to be had in order to hook someone, on a campaign or in an article or a journalist or whoever you're talking to, right? Influencer. So I think that helped a lot. So I had really high brand equity. I was just telling the guys before that, like founder content marketing now, VCs are like pushing for it.
Yes.
At the time that I was doing it, they were just like, why are you wasting your time making videos? And I'm like, no, I have to tell this story. Like people need to know why I've used these ingredients. People need to know what relevance it has, what the story is of it coming about. So I think that helped a lot with, awareness.
So more than throwing marketing dollars, it's the strategy.
We didn't throw any marketing dollars till I raised my angel round.
Okay.
And I didn't really know how to analyze marketing dollars till I got acquired.
Yes.
So, it's in quite a learning,
So good, like Steve Jobs says, the dots will eventually connect. Like, why did you learn that at an early age and everything works out kind of thing. Okay. Great. So as you said, education is still a big thing. Now you are running the clinics business and after your mom passed away. And, how do you, stay abreast of what's happening in the industry and, evolve the services that you offer in the clinic?
So I think it really helps now because we have a really good leadership team. My husband, Ameya, manages the operation. Dr. Saloni, who is our medical head, she manages the medical operations. And I think Dr. Saloni and Ameya have created this environment where the doctors are able to debate and have a very collaborative approach. So they're also able to understand different technology if it comes. Obviously, there's a ton of social media. So there are technologies which, the marketing comes first. But then it's also about, because my mom founded this organization called the CDSI, which is the Cosmetic Dermatology Society of India. It's a network of, top dermatologists across India, where Dr. Saloni and the alumni who worked with my mom all sort of understand the new things that are coming up, and they get peer reviews from, each other. Like somebody in Delhi has bought this machine and they've had a good experience with it because the after sales support, or somebody in Chennai has bought Y technology and these are the issues that people are facing, so we should learn from it. And I think that's sort of the CDSI umbrella helps us not only stay abreast, but also has some level of peer review, plus the internal, debate between the doctors to evaluate, what works, what doesn't work, from a commercial perspective as well as from a scientific and medical perspective.
Cool. So now that how many doctors do you have in the 3 clinics?
So we have 5, right?
5, okay. And in overall, in terms of staffing and these clinics?
About 50, if
Cool.
you count
Okay.
everyone.
And so what do you do in terms of employee retention and making sure some of these folks can go and say, I can start my own business, I know this so well? How does it work for?
So it's funny, and I think that I owe Ameya the credit for that. I just joined the business about 6 months ago. And I think what he's done, along with Dr. Saloni, is create a very collaborative environment. We've had doctors who come with us, been like, I thought I was going to work here for 1 year, but now it's been 5, and I have no plans of leaving. I think it's really about that balance of autonomy versus, sort of like you have the SOPs, but you get to choose what treatment protocol works for this patient. You have a relationship with the patient. And I think at some level, the doctors who've left us have only moved cities, and that's the reason we hope to stay. I understand that as we scale, it's going to be a bigger issue. But I think that relationships take precedence over, short-sightedness. So yeah, I think that, I wish I knew there was a formula that existed, but at this scale, which is small, it's about hiring the right kind of people who fit in with your culture.
Cool. So we'll come to the scaling of the clinics in a bit, but before that, the actual retail business you built, of course, you did sell the business. And can you share more around how that sale happened? Strategically, many people may not exit a business that early. You built a successful brand. India is a very large country. Every portal like Nykaa, Amazon has your products. So what led to that sale?
So, I mean, perfectly honestly, I was exhausted. There was a year of like a lot of trauma, 2 years of a lot of trauma. My mom passed away of pancreatic cancer. My dad was in the ICU a couple of times. And I was like, when you're a single founder, it gets exhausting. So I keep joking around with my friends to say that I was ready to sell it for 5 rupees. But fortunately, at that time, there was a lot of companies that were looking to acquire smaller companies, either because they were prepping for an IPO or like there were these like house of brand models that were being funded by investors. And, they were like grasping for any sort of company that had like a moat with like retention and an NPS. And fortunately for us, we had all of that. So it sort of worked out well. And the kind of money that I was being offered, I think if I had exited 3 months earlier, 3 months later, I would have not made. But it was almost like a financial no-brainer decision in the sense that like it would take me 10 years to get to that kind of exit.
Yeah.
Or at least like 5 to 7. And when you don't have the energy left, you're just emotionally exhausted and drained that you can't put in that money. Like you can't put in that energy to get to that space.
So I think it's a good learning for other founders also. Like timing is a very important thing on when you exit. Sometimes you have to notice what's the market momentum. Otherwise, the same business is worth a lot less. So,
yeah. And I think it's also about emotionally where you are. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing about being a scientist is that you're constantly reminded of the biases that exist in your brain. And as a founder, I think, and I angel invest a lot. So I see this a lot in founders where they believe their business is the best. But as a scientist, you have to enter saying that, why is this the worst? And then sort of build arguments to build against that. Yeah. So I think that also helps in terms of thinking.
Great.
And, post the exit, I think I had a tremendous learning. I got the right partner. I have no complaints about the exit. I'm very happy with the way that it turned out.
Great. Good. And you said you also angel invest. So let's say, if I'm sure, then people from this industry who want to start a business come to you. Any typical advice you would have for someone who wishes to be an entrepreneur in the beauty and wellness industry at large?
So I think I just had a chat, a session yesterday with my university, my alma mater. They had me as a, speaker talking to people who are getting a degree in like cosmetic and, perfumery entrepreneurship. And I think it's like you need to be prepared. And in today's day and age with AI, a lot of your questions can be answered, but you need to use AI in a conjunction with, a panel of experts, mentors, consumers. And before you go to any investor, be extremely prepared because that investor may give you half an hour, either because they think you're promising or you have a personal relationship with someone they know or things like that. But you need to knock their socks off and be over prepared. The founders who I do tend to fund, they tend to have looked at all different angles and presented it in a way that makes a lot of sense where like, okay, I know the value that I can add. I know the doors that I can open. So yeah, prep is the only thing that...
Yeah. And I think good founders have not prep and attention to a lot of detail, as you said. With AI nowadays, of course, it's a lot easier. There's tools available, but still the knowing how will they crack the market. And
for sure. I think AI is not your only tool, but it helps you structure your thoughts so that, like AI will give you benchmarks that don't exist. Like AI will say that, your average customer acquisition cost is like 200 rupees, where it's not. So
cool. So So where do you see in terms of the growth now that you're exclusively focused on the clinics? What do you see the future? What are you planning for Dr. Sheth's clinics?
It's too early to say. I think eventually we'd want a few clinics which have like really, really good high quality doctors. Focus on the training there because I do think that is where my mom excelled. She spent her whole life creating a field where not only she learned but also educated. And I think I want to carry on that legacy. So create, for lack of a better example, a McKinsey for doctors, where they're trained to the level where they can present themselves in an international space and be respected, which provides value for the consumer as well as the doctor.
And I think, yeah, in the med spa industry at large, I still see education as a big element. So I think that's the right call to say, double down more on education because that's how your mom built.
I mean, we have 50 years of data, so we know what works, what can go wrong, and when things go wrong, how to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that thought process I think today in the industry, and I was having a conversation with a very, very established founder the other day. He's had, like an IPO and everything. And he was also saying, like, literally the words he said was like, "Ye med spa sab kachra kachra hai." Like, koi bhi jaake apna med spa khol sakta hai, and we don't want to be that.
Yeah.
And it's true. People get trigger happy with new technologies. People get like, they don't evaluate things properly.
Yeah.
And you have people who are, semi-qualified opening places where people are trusting their faces with. So
Yeah.
and I think that is the value that I want to add.
Cool. And we were discussing about in India as a large country. I mean, in terms of your expansion, you're in Mumbai, which as we were discussing, you came from New York to Mumbai. It's the same, move, very active city kind of stuff. How would you prioritize locations and where you might expand?
So I think right now it's too early to say. In Bombay, Bombay definitely.
Yeah.
Known devil is better than unknown devil. And like I was telling you earlier as well, expanding in India is almost like expanding in different countries. So there is a different culture, different value system, different language in each state. So, I think you focus on what you know first, you build the systems, and then you see if it can work outside that environment.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's a good advice because you could very well get very overconfident saying, okay, obviously you have the best clinics in Mumbai. Let me go to Hyderabad or Chennai. And it's like very different countries. So better to say that, is there more space within Mumbai for you to open and expand before you venture out?
Yeah, I think I compare it to therapy. You have to look internally, fix your problems internally before you like expose yourself to the world.
Yeah.
So I think that there's still like the team has managed to do a phenomenal job with, medical operations and things like that. But there still needs to be a lot of work that needs to be done within your own system before you can get outside and adapt that to a new system.
If you're enjoying the show, we would really appreciate it if you left us a review on Apple Podcasts. It only takes a minute and it helps others find the podcast. You can also follow along on YouTube and Spotify so you never miss an episode. So since you are obviously very qualified and have built a brand, I wonder what is the one non-negotiable skincare routine that you would recommend to your patients, saying you must do this?
This is very boring. And I'm sure like you have everyone on your the podcast saying this, but like particularly for Indian skin, it's the same. Sunscreen.
Okay.
My skincare routine is very boring, and I insist that everyone stays boring because Indian skin tends to have damaged barriers. So sunscreen and barrier cream, I think, are two non-negotiables.
That's very interesting. I'm in software, but I was recently also I went to get some service with one of my customers in the US, and the lady was so particular, saying, okay, even if you don't do anything else, can you please make sure you take your sunscreen? And I was like, I always used to have this arrogance which says, oh, I'm from India, I don't need sunscreen. All this is for, people with fair skin and all that stuff. But then now I'm learning that, and that's why my wife said the only product she's tried of yours is sunscreen, So
yeah, I mean, the thing is also that like we're learning so much about melanin now.
Yeah.
And we realize that like, it's in America, they have this thing where they say that, like, oh, I have melanin, so it's going to protect me against like skin cancer. But skin cancer is not the only thing. Yes, we do have a lower incidence of certain types of skin cancer.
Yeah.
But you still need protection because aging, eczema, like everything is just like, it becomes a lot easier with sunscreen.
That's good advice, everyone. So, of course, switching on to something else. In terms of course, you're in the beauty industry, but what do you do for your personal well-being and wellness?
I lift. I really like lifting. I have 3 dogs. They're my love and passion. We eat a lot. My husband is an amazing cook. He loves to host. He loves to everything he posts on Instagram ends up being I say this with full confidence, but it's better than most Michelin restaurants that we've been to.
Yeah.
So he's very creative in the kitchen. And we travel. We love traveling, learning new cultures, sort of he enriches creatively.
So I'm glad when I asked you for wellness, of course, you said lift, but also you said dogs, because I also believe that wellness is about doing things which give you, that feeling good factor. And if spending time with dogs or cooking helps you, then that's your wellness routine and, keeps you in a zone kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I think there is nothing more meditative than spending a morning with your dog.
Yeah.
Just lying down and cuddling with them.
Yeah.
It is the most relaxing, cathartic, you have the oxytocin angle, and then your breathing is sort of calm because you have someone leaning on you. But yeah, I strongly encourage dogs. It's a prescription everyone should write.
So you said you're a foodie.
Yeah.
So any recommendations of best restaurants in Mumbai that we should visit?
So many. So generally, for seafood, we go to Trishna. It's really good. Gajali on the other side of town if you're there. Bombay tends to have a seafood-heavy culture, but it also has this culture called Malwani cuisine, which is Konkan food from the Konkan coast. So we go to this place called Nab Chaitanya or Chaitanya, and that tends to be a lot spicier and more flavorful. I'm using more local cuisines to demonstrate because I figure, people who are going to be looking at this aren't locals. So those 2 sort of buckets are things that you should eat when you're in Bombay.
I always try to ask people, is there a particular book or something which has always inspired you or stood out for you?
So I think in terms of a book, in terms of business principles, there are some that I feel that, are immortal, that human behavior doesn't change. Technology may change and, lives may change, but human behavior intrinsically at a psychological level still remains stimulus response. And for that, I think Robert Cialdini's influence, The Power of Persuasion, is something that I always turn back to when I get lost, to remind myself of how to persuade people. But I think in terms of technology, in terms of, yesterday at my alma mater, someone asked me, is there a book on the cosmetic industry that you think you should read? And I was like, if you read a book on a cosmetic industry, you're obsolete the moment you write it, because things are evolving so fast that you need to be relevant, right? And it used to be that books that came out sort of positioned you to create a product that had a hero life cycle of 10 years. Today, if you have 3 years, you're lucky. And you need to learn how to be agile and quick. So
I think you're right.
Media.
I think you're right, because and especially with AI, nowadays people can learn everything very quickly. So it's about, as you said, the human empathy and engagement and power of persuasion. All these are important skills you to pick up, because AI can help you learn everything around it as well.
The variables come through AI, technology, digital media.
Yeah.
But the foundations are still, across all.
So I wanted to thank you, Dr. Aneesh, about making the time for this. And it was a pleasure to just really learn about how, the dots tend to connect, because your journey was by no means intentional, saying, it was in the planned family succession. You were on a certain journey, but, the universe conspires and brings us all back to where we belong.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I think I was very honored to be invited.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Growth Diaries is brought to you by Zenoti.